What's going on, everybody? Happy Wednesday to you, and welcome to Midnight Hatter Live, the live variety show that we talk about Gundam, video games, tabletop games, all that good stuff. I am, of course, Steven, your host, and joining me, as always, is Adam Blue. How you doing, buddy?
Doing good, doing good. Excited this week, GBO2 on Steam.
Yep,
Just,
and
eh,
and you dropped a perfectly topical video this morning featuring. I see Talos in the chat here,
oh,
USS
nice.
Talos. You and he talked through several tips that are. It's like I've been playing the game for 2.5 years and still don't understand the actual mechanics of GBO2, and now there's a PC release, so it's like
Yeah.
you know, uh, I'm just never gonna get good. Like,
Hey, but you can always have fun. That's the thing with GBO2. It's just fun,
yeah.
honestly. So,
Yeah, last week was fun, even with the technical difficulties of the stream, and that's
yes.
all on me, by the way. My apologies. But we had a blast playing through some of these scenarios and just getting to know some of these guys. Like I said, I think I mentioned this on stream. It's kind of like putting together a tabletop RPG session where it's like getting six people together in their 30s to play video games is like a monumental feat.
I know,
Um,
especially a weekday. That was awesome.
Yeah.
That was awesome.
Yeah, so we're definitely gonna do that again, but I didn't
Nice.
wanna wear everybody out with too much GBO, just
Yeah, I get it. I'm already playing it enough, especially with this PC release. So it's like, I just want to chat for a little bit.
yes, yeah, so we're gonna decompress, we're gonna talk some Zeta stuff. Believe me, Daddy Hatter has some opinions about this Verka, we're
Ooh.
gonna get into it. And actually, you know what? Hey, you guys know that, like, obviously I love this kit, uh, brief let's rewind it here. Have you finished building yours, Adam?
No, and you know what? That might be telling.
That
It
could
may
be.
be.
That
I
could be.
wonder, it's like I enjoy building it just like any kit. I guess the difference with this is because it's or are we getting this deep right now, or do we wanna save it?
I mean, we can, well, so like I said, we're going to talk about Zeta. We've got some video game
Yeah.
chat that we're going to go get into afterwards. But yeah, I mean, I'm thinking we'll start with talking about this Zeta kit because, you know, I, I say facetiously like I've got some hot takes about it, and I do. But I don't want anyone to, cards on the table. I don't want anyone to think like, oh, Hatter's just hating on this kit because, like, oh, like
Yeah, Hatter ain't hating. There was something, yeah, Hatter ain't hating. Yeah, that
Hatter
that
hating.
needs to be a thing.
Yeah, it's Midnight Hater. Midnight Hater live. Um,
That's
but
good.
but I do want to say hi to the chat. Robert, I saw you in here. Sniper, always with the first comment. Ultronimus Talos, good to see you
Yeah,
guys.
good to see
Hope
you
you
guys.
guys are having a good day so far and a great week. Um,
Yeah.
Yeah, so like I said, I too am struggling to get through this for
Mm.
I was gonna play a little joke on you. I was gonna say like, well, I've got mine finished here, but the truth is this is the Master Grade 2.0. So this guy's finished, and
And
I've
you had
got
just
some.
finished that too, right? In preparation?
Yes, this was only
Cool.
finished on Saturday, and then started work on the Verka, but it didn't get as much done as I would have liked to before today. But even that said, there are some things about it that, like I said, there's some great stuff about this kit, and I think you brought up some of it when you and I talked privately. But there's some stuff that leaves me scratching my head, like what the hell were they thinking? So yeah, let's go ahead and dive into it. I'm gonna actually hop onto a my screen share here so that we can show you these kits side by side. There's some good
Cool.
comparisons in terms of scale and proportions because yeah, the uh the Master Grade 2.0 has a much larger, wider head and a sort of narrower waist and frame. And I think even, you mentioned last week when we were doing kind of an unboxing on your channel that there's the interview with Mr. Katoki where he talks about like, a lot of these modern interpretations of the Zeta are very cool looking, but they're not quite anime accurate. The anime portrays the Zeta as being a little blockier.
Mhm.
So I think that some of that stuff has been faithfully recreated. What would you say?
Yeah, you know what? There was something about it, especially like I recognize it when I look at the face, where I feel like that the lines are just so clean, where it's like, man, I don't want to panel line that. But I mean, that might still be, the thing to do. Um, the one main thing is I talked about this before, I think on a previous podcast, where it's like all these very whether it's a robot spirits, a high grade, a real grade, they're all different to a degree. And it's hard for me
Yes.
to be like, which do I like the best? And so I still don't know. I will say that the main thing that came out of the build, well, one thing I want to say as a positive was I loved that the Vulcans were metallic, like
Yes.
right out of the box. I kind of like that.
There are some metallic finish pieces like on the chest as well.
Yeah, and that's a good, like, just a cherry on top when it comes to building something anyway, to have that color separation to that degree, because yeah, it's fun to detail it myself, but the other part comes to with the building of it. I was reminded of building I think the real grade, where it's like you're a lot of times you're building the transforming parts. And
Yes.
sometimes it takes away from the feeling of building the mobile suit.
Because you're
You know
not
what I mean?
like, chest, arm, arm.
Right.
It's like you're building all these little minor mechanisms inside of the larger robot.
Which is kind of cool on one hand, but on the other hand, it makes the process a little different for me. So I think maybe that's why I didn't finish building it, because I know it's like, okay, this is more of I am setting this up to be a built figure instead of I'm going to spend my time building the figure.
Now, that said, I do appreciate all these little minor mechanical details of like, when you're putting together these tiny components that kind of lock together in its transformed state. And I'm glad that you mentioned the metallic effect parts because that brings me to my first what the hell were you thinking, Bandai. Um, so as far as like effect pieces go on the kit, yes, we have some metallic pieces, but then you have ear effect part pieces for the eyes and the cameras and head. And it's
Mm.
all solid clear with metallic color corrective stickers. Now, cards on the table. This is my first Verka, so this might be something, maybe the double Zeta does the same thing, maybe the Psycho Zaku, etc. Um, is it common to not have colored clear effect parts? Because I was like, why even make the effect part clear if you're going to make a color corrective sticker for it?
You know what? That's a good question. So I have this Verka V2, and I mean, the stickers look exactly the same, so I can't tell if I remember if it was clear or colored or not. But
Yeah,
you do bring up a good point, because I remember as I was building the head, I'm like, with all these clear parts, this would be perfect for an LED.
yeah,
But
but
then it's like it comes with these stickers, which they're good stickers because they're reflective, but it almost makes the clear pointless unless I don't know, like, maybe they're expecting people may want to customize and put LEDs, but it's not like it's made for LEDs.
yeah, no, it's not. I mean, the head component is probably a little too small for one of those standard LED units that Bandai sells. So, I mean, I painted it with a sort of, and you probably can't see this on my camera, but I did paint it with a sort of translucent,
Oh,
clear, so that way you can still see that it's a clear effect part. So it's like I have these faux acrylics, this stuff, um, art skills. If you're looking for a solid color, do not use this trash. But if you
oh,
want something that you can see through, that you can layer up, and it kind of reminds me of like if you're into wargaming and you're into like Warhammer, that sort of thing. Citadel contrast paints or the Army Painter. I forget what it's called, like the Army Painter speed paints, right? They're more
hmm,
like glazes that you can see through. So you have to layer
interesting.
them like 5 or 6 layers in order to get real color. So I used a blue and a green on the clear effect parts, and so now the effect parts are still clear, but they have the tint of the color that they're supposed to be, because I don't do
Hmm.
stickers.
Well, yeah, that brings up a good point, because I know I think there's a lot of people that take, the building seriously and don't use stickers, and so I wonder if there is an intention, at the end of the day, is there an intention for that? I don't know.
Perhaps so. And I mean, there's some things about just in general Verkaz that don't sit well with me. One of the things about like the Verkaz Azabi, one of the many reasons that I don't have one. It's not that I can't afford it. No, the it drives me crazy seeing the Zazabi with the sleeves Neo Xeon on its shield, like the sleeves crest instead of the Char's Neo Xeon crest.
Oh,
I'm
interesting.
like, that's not what the Zazabi looked like in the anime.
Yeah, I never noticed that. Okay, that's pretty interesting.
But now that said, like again, there's so many cool things about this kit. The mechanism by which it transforms, picking up the test plate, um, cockpit slides out here. There is a slight difference in the folding V fins, which I think that's worth mentioning as well. So the folding V fins on the 2.0 kind of fold straight up, whereas the ones on the Verka point they
Mm.
basically touch. Um, that's just a engineering choice that they made, I guess. But which also brings up another good point. Like you said, um, it comes with two different versions of the VFin, where you can set it up to where you just want it to be a robot, or if you want it to transform. But then it's like, well, then why bother?
Yeah, I didn't understand that too. When I was looking at the 2 V fins, I'm like, "I wonder why they have these 2 different ones." But I didn't notice a difference because they both transform, right?
So the two VFins that it comes with, it's really just the front right here. So um, this VFin has a gap in between where the V fins can fold up
Oh.
inside. The other one kind of has a cover over the top of it that covers where the V fins come together.
So that's why I was kinda confused when I put on that piece, to get the V-fin on. It seemed like there was a gap, and I'm like, "Why is there a gap here? Did I do it wrong?" And so, yeah, just a little and that goes to what I think I notice in general with Verka, that there's very unconventional ways of putting things together where sometimes it seems like you're not really putting it together, but you are. But it sometimes makes it seem fragile. Like, really, this I feel it with this, victory too.
Yeah,
Just there's some parts of it, especially how easy the gun will just fall apart. I think I have some sticky tack in there, but there's just little tiny things where you plug them in, but it's not necessarily too tight. Sometimes there's a gap because it's supposed to do something.
sure.
Um, but yeah, I think it's like a Verka quirk.
A
Uh,
Verquirk, if you will. No,
okay, I should have
no,
done
no.
that.
So yeah, no, well, and so like with these transforming units, like I'm sure that you've noticed, like kind of on the torso, where you've got these little plugs that kind of hold the waist in its various locking formations, which is awesome.
Yeah,
So then that begs the question, because you also have on the front, we have these little flaps that turn downwards for anime accuracy, but they are just loose. They don't, you know, there's nothing to
yeah.
hold them in the intended position that you want them to be in. They just kind of are freewheeling. So I'm like, you put so much care into the locking waist joint, but then you come up here and it's just a single piece of plastic with a flap on it.
Yeah. It's just another example of very unconventional ways of building Gunpla, which could be cool if maybe you're tired of the same old Gunpla. Build a Verka. It's gonna be a little different.
Yeah, it'll give you something to think about.
Yeah.
Um, And then yeah, I mean the last thing I would say about the kit itself is the plastic is fantastic compared to the 2.0 as you would expect it to be. I have to say that like a lot of these sort of early 2000s kits, have very brittle plastic. The Verka Zeta has I don't want to say soft plastic, but it's
There's something about it where it has a very fine look to it where yeah, I think I see I know what you mean, but I don't know how to explain it.
yeah,
And I noticed it with the face, especially. The plastic on the face. So yeah, whenever there's those small panel line parts, it's very fine. It's very smooth. It's the detail shows.
yeah. Yeah, I love it. And
Yeah.
the gate placement is great.
Oh yeah.
Sometimes I've been like, I'm filing down because I'm very diligent about my nub marks, of course. I have trauma from my high school days of like, oh man, I can't believe I use nail clippers to cut this out. But but yeah, so I mean the placement of some of the nub marks, even if you were kind of sloppy cleaning it up, it's hidden. Like a lot of these,
Yeah.
except for one, there's one that sticks out. And if you're going to have a nub mark stick out, then of course, Bandai, why not put it dead center of the front of the freaking chest plate? It's like
Oh,
you probably can't
mm.
see it because I actually did a decent job filing it. But
Oh, okay.
but yeah, dead center of the front chest plate is a nub mark, and I'm like, you couldn't have put it on the
Wow.
backside, and like,
Yeah, that is a good point. How yeah, there's some I even noticed with, and I guess it will get hidden later on though, and maybe that was the intention. Even the yellow right on the front top is a nub area that I'm gonna have to clean up a little more. But I guess that
yeah,
is kind of hidden looking at where you're at now.
yes,
Um,
it does sit
yeah,
behind the chest.
yeah, but
I'm
yeah,
glad
it's
you and I are kind of in the same stage of building.
yeah, no, really, it's again, I don't want to be negative, and I kind of feel you too because we've been anticipating this.
Yeah, did I
It's
overhype it?
It's just I know with Verkaz, like, and really I've only built the V2, but it was just a little weird, and so
Yeah.
I know that guy kinda gets away with kind of unconventional designs, but I guess, looking at the version 2 you have next to it, that guy looks great too. Now that you've finished that, are there some flaws on that that stand out to you?
Yeah, I would say that one of the problems I have with it, shoulder armor, is the way that it connects is kind of poorly conceived. Where it's like you have this one little round spot, and then this little gray flap sits over that polycap. But the joint that attaches it to the shoulder armor is so tight that even just moving it a little bit, that pops right out. So
Oh,
it
okay.
basically just sits loose on the shoulder. And maybe that's just my fault. Maybe I'm a poor builder. but uh but yeah, I mean
No.
there's definitely stuff about the 2.0 that I would say Verka so far has been um the waist joint, the fact that the Verka has like a locking waist joint, whereas this one,
Mm,
is a little bit looser. And it's all comes down to the transforming mechanism, I'm sure.
yeah.
Um the
Ugh,
the Master Grade 2.0 I think has a little bit more chunk to it that I like. Even just looking at
okay.
the wings on the runner, the flight armor on the version 2.0 is a lot bigger and kind of,
Mm.
it feels more like the Zeta to me.
Okay. Yeah, that'll be interesting, especially if you complete it and you decide you're gonna put the 2.0 wing binders on the or the flight unit on the Furka.
It's like I do even like the head shape of the 2.0 compared to the Verka. It's a little wider. I don't know. There's
Yeah,
certain
no, I know what you mean with the I did my comparison, like, on the aerial high grade versus robot spirits, and I thought they looked better with a head swap.
yeah,
It's very interesting, and it's cool too, actually, because you can really make your ultimate definite version of,
yeah, Zeta define.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's literally so I wonder, are you open to that, or are you more of the type where, "No, I'm gonna keep it as is intended?"
I think we'll see where I go with it because
Okay.
there's definitely I think that there is an optimal build here. Just looking at it. And one other thing that I need to point out, this is so I'm not sure if maybe there's another interview where Mr. Katoki talks about how this is definitively a Zeta, as in Zeta from Zeta Gundam, not Zeta from Double Zeta.
Mm.
Because the Verka comes with a tiny pilot Camille, right? Which we would expect. The version 2.0 comes with this very androgynous looking, you know, maybe it's still clearly Camille, but could easily be painted to be Ruluka.
Oh, interesting.
And this Ruluka erasure will not stand with me. No, I mean, honestly, it's funny because in the instruction manual for the 2.0, it shows you how to paint this like Camille, but you could just as easily paint that to look like Ruluka.
Yeah, you're right. It does give that look where it's just kind of like It could be Camille or a girl, which is saying something, isn't it?
Right. All of the girls' name jokes aside,
Yeah.
it could be Ruluka. So maybe in my head canon for these two kits, I'll have one
Oh,
version be the double
yeah.
Zeta kit and one version be the. I was already kind of planning on after I saw that this Camille. I mean, this is a better Camille sculpt anyway.
Yeah.
I'm thinking I'm just gonna go ahead and paint the version 2.0 to be Ruluka, and we'll call
'Cause
it
it's
good.
shorter also. I mean,
Yeah.
which, may be in line. I mean, maybe Camille is short. I don't know.
I think so. I think whenever they show him standing next to Shar, he's
Yeah.
uh,
Oh, yeah, that's right. He is.
um, and I don't know. I don't even know if you're gonna be able to see this, but I did paint my Camille pilot figure inside of the Zeta cockpit, which
Oh, cool.
I tried to do as much of the painting on the runner as I could prior to like actually fixing him in
Oh,
place.
interesting,
Um,
yeah.
but that was my first time doing a painting on a minifigure that small. So
Yeah, that's a good point. I have so many, and I haven't even tried it when I can. Because lately I've been doing better painting. I need to go back to my first. I think I wanna say that real grade unicorn came with the pilot.
yeah, yeah.
I
The
so
real grades come with the pilots.
I need to go back and paint that since it was my first.
And Camille and Benaj are pretty easy ones because their
Yeah, the
flight suits are all pretty much white
white.
anyway.
Yeah, I think Benaja just has, like, some red on it or
Yeah.
something.
So I
Yeah.
mean, with Camille's, it's like a little black stripe around the face, maybe a blue face
Visor.
panel visor. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um. So yeah. I'm looking at chat here, and Rogue New Type says definitive high grade Zeta. He took the high grade Zeta and put the real grade head, shield, decals, and weapons on it. That's pretty much yeah. I've been working on making an adapter for the real grade wings for the high grade Zeta
Mm.
because one of the things that in the real grade Zeta has this same feature. Um, one of the things that's pretty neat about the master grade Zeta's wing structure is the high grade, basically the wings flap out like that, and that's it. Whereas the real grade has this locking mechanism featured on the master grade as well, which gives you a lot bigger wingspan when it's in its flight mode.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, that's an awesome feature I like of the Zeta is, the flight unit part, like, because it makes sense for atmosphere flight and stuff, like, and it reminds me of, like, in Seed is the first time I saw where they really have these ginormous, like, jetpack
Yeah,
with wings, like a plane attached to the back, but that's, like, kind of a cool middle ground.
yeah, I think so. And it always looks cool when the Zeta goes to fire the high mega launcher and those little wing stabilizers flap out.
Oh, I haven't realized that.
I'm
I'll
pretty
have to go check out an
sure.
animation of that.
Yeah, I mean, if you watch like some of the video game footage, especially GBO2, which
Oh, okay, yeah, there we
when you see
go.
that high mega launcher come out, you'll see the little wings flap up to hold it in place while it fires. Which, speaking of, Pyro's saying that the PC port of GBO2 mouse control is hot garbage. Yeah, so Night Captain, who was on stream with us last week, he said if you do play PC, just plug your control in. Please
Yeah.
don't try to.
Because each mobile suit has a specific turning speed, and it's supposed to mimic more of the time it takes, and so, yeah,
Exactly.
it's not Twitch mouse controls at all.
Yeah.
It's
So
yeah.
you don't get the benefit of
Like,
of
I would love
FPSs.
Yeah, exactly, and I'd love to see someone map, flight control, joystick controls. I have a Cytec X52 that I've used for Sims in the past. I would love to see if someone can figure out a way to, like and I also have that new Thrust Master, I think it's called, for, like, PlayStation, but, yeah, if a way to get that to work,
That would
because
be
technically
sweet.
it would work that way,
Yeah.
and that would be pretty sick.
See that, and that would be the definitive Gundam experience. Would be piloting a mobile suit
Yeah.
with dual joysticks and.
Yes, dual joysticks, like, where you could, like, switch, yeah, what weapon that you're gonna use, and then, like, oh, man, that would be great.
But yeah, I hope that everyone is enjoying GBO2 on Steam so far. I have not gotten it yet because my PC setup. I'm a Mac guy. I don't.
What's going on right now is so, like, some server issues when it comes to matchmaking. You, of course, can, like, play through all the tutorials, like, the mandatory ones and the optional ones that give you a bunch of suits, and they're pretty generous. I already got the Hazensley in the
Wow.
gotcha right away, and I love that suit, so I've been
Yeah.
able to main that so far. But yeah, the matchmaking so far just kinda messes up, but you can still play custom practice, whatever.
Yeah.
But hey, what game, and we're gonna probably get into game related stuff, but what games don't release with issues? I mean, that's just how it is nowadays.
Yeah, I mean, that's just kind of part and parcel of being a gamer is that, if you're going to be a day one gamer, you're going to suffer the consequences of your enthusiasm.
Yep. That's the truth.
um but yeah, I'll switch back to just our ugly faces here because yeah, like you said, let's get into some video game chatter because I think that
Yeah.
that's probably all that I have to say about the Zeta so far. Like I
So
said,
far.
a lot of great stuff about it, a lot of stuff that I'm just like questionable decisions. Not it doesn't take away from the enjoyment of the kit for me. It's just
Yeah,
why.
and as we build more and more and more, you inevitably get into that depth. I mean, I with the kits I built recently, I'm like, man, I need to make a video where I compare different wrists on just high grades and like why did they do a wrist like this, but they did a wrist like this on this one.
Yeah.
Little things like that where it's like they could probably grab the best of all and just smash it together.
Yeah, one of my
So,
favorite things about high grade wrists is like the wrist joint that is slightly angled outward
yeah,
for gunner type hands.
exactly.
Huge benefit. I wish that there were more of those like angled wrists downward for beam saber wielding.
I know, and that's what I love when robot spirits come with those hands, because sometimes they won't, and then sometimes they will, and it's like, "Oh, fantastic." Yeah.
Strange design decisions.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
speaking of design decisions, and
Oh,
with
yeah.
the GBO2 launch here, I checked out a video this week. It's an older video from a channel that I've been following for a while. Game Maker's Toolkit. I've probably referenced some of his videos before. Mark Brown. If you're not following him, definitely check him out. Even if you're not into game development, some of his insights on game design decisions and like just game theory are amazing. And so one of the things that I stumbled across was this how game designers protect gamers from themselves. And I shared that with Adam and we kind of, you know, went back and forth talking about like, man, there's so many different little mechanics in games that game developers will use to incentivize or disincentivize certain behaviors. With in reference to GBO2, I think that there's a lot that really discourages you um from being a range like I would say being a mid-range player. I think that being either a melee player or being a long-range player, but I would say that there's a lot that discourages you from being a mid-range player because if you're going to get stunned and then melee comboed anyway, then you're not going to want to be within, a certain
Yeah.
range of somebody. You want to be up close and personal. Um, but then, if you're going to be so far away that you get sniped by a support, also not ideal. So,
Yeah, that's a good point, and Talos and I were talking about this because we'll, like, play and me and him will one-on-one, and I'll be like, "Man, why would I be doing this bad?" And he'd bring up, "Well, it's because when they designed these suits, they designed with the team play aspect in mind."
mhm,
So, like, mid-range, like what you're talking about, it's like it works if you are aware of your team and your team is aware of you. If not, you're gonna have, yeah, a hard time. You're not gonna know where you should go. And
yeah,
if you try to stay back, you might be targeted as a support potentially. If you try to go forward, you might just get slaughtered by raids. And I think what GBO2 tries to do, and that's why all of their um they have those AI missions you can do to gain stuff. It's
yeah,
always co-op because they're trying to really push play with your team.
yes,
And so with the paper rock scissors might seem like super static, but it's not, because the idea is they want to incentivize you to play with others. That helps not only to make it a little more fun, but on a business level, more people that are going to be wanting to play together. You get your friends to play, more people might be spending money on tokens. So
there you
there's,
go.
there's an aspect there.
Yeah, so I mean that is Bandai really crafting an experience that creates a particular play style that is, you don't want to say optimal, but it's the way that the devs want you to play the game.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, and and that's been a thing for Gundam games for a long time, and they do a really good job, I would say, of using positive incentives. In Mark Brown's video, he talks about one of the examples he brings up is XCOM 2, and the way that the developers wanted to discourage players from dawdling and playing like the most conservative and the most risk averse way. So they put in the turn timer. And it's like, okay, well, with this turn timer, you have to finish the mission as quickly as you can. So you're going to be taking risks, you're going to be losing people, and a lot
Yep.
of people hated that because it's like, why are you going to put these to the point that they even made mods that remove the turn
Yeah.
timer from the game. That's how upset people were about that. Now, take by contrast, say Gundam G Generation Genesis or any of the G Generation games where you have those kind of story mission perks that you
Bonus.
get, the
Yeah.
bonuses for, it's like, hey, can you destroy these missiles in less than 3 turns? So you
It
still have the same mechanic. It's still a turn timer, but instead
yeah.
of punishing you and saying you fail the mission if you don't do it, you could
You just
unlock,
don't get the bonus.
yeah, you just don't get
And
the
then
bonus.
what's cool about that is that plays on the player's psyche because they'll
Yeah,
see there's an opportunity to get something that, like the video talks about, helps the player just be better moving forward. Yeah, it's a bonus that you can use. And so even if you fail it, you're going to then play again to try to do it. And I
yeah,
think that is a perfect example and could be the difference between Japanese developed games and Western developed games where they are trying to figure out, okay, how can we incentivize the player to play this way? Because I
right.
would do that if I failed the bonus objective in G Generation Genesis, I would just immediately play it again. I would quit sometimes and just play again because I wanted to just get that done. And that taught me to like kind of push my gameplay. Like, yeah, maybe throw these units a little more forward. And I know these guys are going to get hit. Maybe I need to think more about, okay, I can lose this much health, but still be able to do this. So,
Yeah.
yeah. And I think it's interesting you brought up XCOM because with the turn-based games, like this these XCOM games though are the newer ones
Mhm.
based on the original, you know. And so I think also as we move forward with game dev, there are modern design things sometimes players are expecting. And so
Yes,
devs have to balance that. And it's
that's true.
interesting though that they went from unlimited turns to specific amount because I don't play those XCOM games, but I think that's a very huge difference without really coming with a
Yeah.
middle ground approach.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
that was, like, basically kneecapping their own design.
Yeah.
Um, and it's funny you mentioned, like, modern design conventions and the sorts of things that gamers just expect. And there's another example from a different Mark Brown video that I have, both of these videos are down in the description below. Watch them after. Um, the
Yeah.
usual spiel. Um, there's a different example that he brings up that you and I have talked about this mechanic as well, is in old school FPS games, or I don't want to say old school, but there's some particular FPS games that are from the early 2000s where ammo management
Mhm.
was actually a skill, because the problem is you would have, maybe you've got 4 rounds in the chamber and you've got some spare ammo, but if you go and reload, those 4 rounds that you had in the chamber are gone because it simulates you removing a clip from a gun, putting one in, and so the 4 rounds that you had before, toast. Modern FPS games, that is completely like, no, however much ammo you had before, you're still going to have that and you're going to get whatever. And
A
so
full clip.
now,
Yeah.
you and I have done this in GBO too, where it's like, basically, if you're not in combat, reload. It's just instinctive. Like,
Yeah.
I just always want to have a full mag. So, you know, there's that design thinking where it's like, okay, well, we don't want players to just constantly reload. So do we punish them by saying, you're going to lose the ammo that you got? Or, the example that Mark Brown talks about is Gears of War, where you've got that active reload system.
Yeah.
And so what he found is that more experienced players, when they were playing Gears of War, were constantly reloading, and so they'd be constantly beating the active reload system, and so they were always had the advanced ammo perk that came from beating the game. Whereas inexperienced players, they weren't even interacting with the ammo buff minigame. So,
Yeah.
but inexperienced players also didn't reload as often. They would just sit there with half a and I've noticed this even just playing video games with my wife. You know, when we're playing Resident Evil together, she'll sit there with like 10 rounds left in the submachine gun and I'm like, "Babe, reload. Reload. You're going to need the like
Yeah. Oh, that's
um
funny.
but yeah, less experienced players don't have that instinctive I need to reload. Just in
Right.
between fights, I'm always going to reload everything.
That and, almost in the same vein, just the aim down sights with lift trigger.
Yeah.
Like, how that's just a natural thing when even in a game that invents it in a way, like Call of Duty, they have that hip fire accuracy because the option of if you want to not aim down sights, but still people will just do that. Like,
Yeah.
even if someone's right in front of you, like, aim first, then shoot, and it's like, "No, no, no, I gotta get out of that habit," and it's
Yeah.
almost like these games have built bad habits that have no real significance on the gameplay.
And so from a game development perspective, the problem is it's like, okay, well, how do you break these bad habits without just saying like, well, we're just going to take away downside aiming. Like you're not going to be able to do left trigger aiming. Well, that's not fair because if the player's expecting it, you kind of have to give it to them. But then how do you disincentivize it in a way that's not punishing? Well, you and I have come up with a couple of different examples. Um, like you said, there's maybe you can take the Gears of War example where the last few rounds of a magazine actually deal more damage than the full magazine.
Mm,
So then the
that's
player is
cool.
faced with a choice like, do I reload and try to get the perk from the reload game, or am I not confident in my abilities as much? So I'm just going to burn out until I get those like last 5 or 10 shots that those I know are going to deal a little bit of extra oomph.
Yeah, that's interesting because there's other options there. Like, for instance, and I'm sure a game does this, where it's unlimited ammo, but it's about surviving and figuring out how to get through the enemies, then having to manage your weapons. Or something that I've been thinking about, like making that reload like with options. Like, what if you hold down the reload button to actually pull out a magazine and put in another one, but you tap it to like start putting in bullets or
Oh
something?
yeah.
I mean, because it's like making a game out of arbitrary things. It's like, a if there's a function in the game, how much does it really lend to the gameplay? And sometimes it doesn't. Like,
Yeah.
the aim down sights, it's more of people feel like, in a way too, when you're pulling in the left trigger, you're holding the controller tighter, and you feel like your thumbs have that better basis of aiming. I
Mhm.
don't know how true that is, and I don't know if that's why we've been comfortable with it, but I wanna say there was a game I was just playing recently where it didn't require aim down sights. Maybe it'll come to me by the end of the show, but
Well,
I was playing.
GBO2, for example, doesn't.
Well, yeah,
And
that
that's a
too.
third person
Yeah,
shooter, but, there's a lot of third person shooters that
that
do
do.
feature that, like Mass
Like
Effect.
Division. Yeah, Division, Sniper Elite, which if I'm not mistaken, all those have the active reload. Like, I almost feel like a lot of these games that wanna be more on the tactical end of shooters just add active reload.
Yeah.
But I wanna say there was another game, it may have just came out, and I don't know what. Oh, I know. I don't think this counts. It was Ratchet& and Clank on PlayStation 5. It's more of a platformer that has shooting elements.
Yeah, yeah,
So it's, like,
but
not
still,
necessary. Yeah.
it's got something in there.
Yeah.
Autonomous in chat saying that Alien Isolation, you had to hold the reload button to reload, otherwise you would do it by individual rounds, which
Oh, wow. I don't remember that. That's awesome.
because it was a revolver, I think.
Another game that I feel like is ahead of its time, it has been still ahead of its time.
Yeah,
Like,
I mean, the AI design in that game is fantastic,
yeah, the graphics, all that, yeah.
and again, it's one of those games where it's like they wanted to disincentivize certain behaviors. So, like for instance, there's no checkpoints in Isolation. You can only save at those telephones, and
Oh, yeah.
saving is an active thing. Like you can't just like
It's
tap
a
save
gameplay
and be
element, yeah.
done. You're sitting there and you have to stick your card in the machine, and if there's a xenomorph walking by you, it's like, please save, please save, please save,
It
or else.
That's a good point because what that's actually doing is providing the experience to the player by making them stressed and fearful because they don't wanna have to repeat something. That
Yeah.
reminds me of System Shock just got its, remaster or remake or whatever. It's more of a remaster, I think, because they just updated the graphics. It came out yesterday. And that doesn't have an autosave system. That has, it's classic quick
Dedicated
save,
saves. Yeah.
where you just go and you hit the quick save. I remember doing that all the time. old school Doom, walk into a room that's large, and I'm like, quick
Mm,
save.
yeah.
Kill a couple
That's
guys, quick save, because I'm like, I don't know when I'm gonna get murdered.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's, like, always the running joke about, like, Skyrim and Oblivion and other Elder Scrolls games where it's like, "Alright,
Oh, yeah.
quick
Before you go
save.
through
I'm
the
gonna just
yeah.
gun some of these guys down."
So, yeah, I think that you know what? I almost feel like we could come up with a list of what developers need to keep in mind. Save system. If it's just a game where you run around on auto saves, fine. But if saving for some reason, like Resident Evil, has to be consciously done, like, is there some sort of gameplay element that could be a mechanic that's part of the experience? Reloading is can there be a mechanic that's part of the experience? And I think a lot of games have strayed away from that because they're trying to be safe, make as much money as possible.
Yeah.
If someone plays it like that doesn't feel like Call of Duty, then they might, not want to play
Right.
it. So
Well, and yeah, that's the other thing is, like, a game like Alien Isolation, I think, flies under the radar because a lot of the game behaviors that it tries to disincentivize are actually trying to create an experience that puts you in that survival horror scenario.
yeah,
So yes, it does stress you out. But it's kind of like that's the point of the game. Whereas there's other
yeah,
games where it's like if you want to relax, this is the type of game you would play.
yeah.
Um, One of the examples that Mark Brown brought up in his video as well was regarding save behavior for Shovel Knight, where it would be like, you had these checkpoints, but the the problem was if you, I think if I remember the video correctly, if you did save, you would lose a bonus, whereas if you didn't save, you would get to keep everything. And so, or no, it was like
I
saving
forget
cost
because
money. Yeah, like
I've
saving
beaten that
cost
game quite a
money.
bit, but
And so
yeah,
then
it might have been related to money.
yeah,
Yeah,
and so like the problem
yeah,
is novice players didn't have enough money to save and also get their upgrades. So the expert players get the best of both worlds because it's like I don't need to save and I get more money. So
yeah,
then the flip side of that was like, okay, how about instead you just get more money if you don't save, but it doesn't cost anything to save. And so that's where it's like the expert players might take the risk of not saving, whereas novice players, it's like, okay, there's no risk to me if I don't, if I choose to save, it's not like it punishes me for it. But if I want to take the risk, I could get more reward. And so that's ultimately what it comes down to is positive incentives versus negative ones.
yeah. And so I'm trying to think of some recent games I've been playing that I've really enjoyed. Is something obvious like Elden Ring. It's such a big area, but it incentivizes exploring because there's that game is insane with anything you can find, like where it's an experience in a random cave that happens to be a dungeon, or just finding an awesome weapon, awesome armor, awesome potion, awesome this, that. So like Elden Ring works by incentive, whereas like in Dark Souls, it was almost too scary to explore because
Yeah.
sometimes there wouldn't be anything. You would go for a while, there wouldn't be something. They did a little different because the bonfires were few and far between in that one.
Yeah. Well, and
And
then
then
I think the Bloodborne example that he brought up was a good one too, where it's like if you deal damage to an enemy that just damaged you, you can win back a
right,
little bit of health. So it
yes, the
discourages
aggressive
that
gameplay.
behavior of like, okay, well, I got hit, I'm gonna run away. Um, you know,
Yeah, and that lends in with Doom, which
yes,
a cool. But you know what's interesting about Doom? I've noticed some other games are incorporating kind of that gameplay, but to me, I played Doom and Doom Eternal. By the time I got to Doom Eternal, I think I was done. It was almost like, yeah, I understand this flow. It
yeah,
didn't really add too much more to it. And then Bolt Gun, I think, is the newest. I can't wait to play it. Bolt Gun is like a Warhammer 40K that's made in the vein of like Quake,
that's
and
kind of
that
cool.
just yeah, that just came out. Quake or Doom 2. I don't know, but I want to get that soon. But they added that system as well. But I've also heard that that game's just good in general. They've kind of so yeah, there's some times where I think there's an initial good idea, but it also needs to be further refined,
Yeah, a little
or
bit of
if it's
polish.
used again, yeah, add some more to it. So like with the newest Zelda. So what I feel like they did was take Breath of the Wild and what they incentivized is just more of that physics, uh, not experimenting,
Yes,
really.
yeah,
But and again, I don't wanna keep talking bad about it because it's obviously an excellent game, but I think it's just it decided to go full on in that direction to
Yeah.
whereas someone that wants a crafted experience, the game just becomes more of a Fortnite creative mode at any time. And I'm like, you know what? That's really cool, especially that generation of gamers, because that's
Yes.
all the thing. Roblox,
That's the
that's all
rage.
that is.
Yeah.
But I think you even brought up that like sometimes you come across an area in that new Zelda and there's an obvious, simple, "Oh, I can just move this platform here."
Yeah.
But then there's so many other things around. It's like, well, what if I made a Rube Goldberg machine to
It
like launch me across?
basically, I
Yeah.
mean, it's I find that now I am enjoying Tears of the Kingdom way more, that I have decided, like, I'm just I'm only gonna engage with the crafting system as much as I have to,
Yeah.
because for me, I'm still looking for that, like, classic Zelda adventure game, and I'm like, you know, yeah, there's all these moving platforms, and I can connect them together and turn it around and lock it into place and then walk across this chasm, or I can just put a bomb here and then stand on this platform and just rocket myself across, and it takes zero crafting at all. And I'm like, I'm gonna do the I'm gonna do the cheap
It
and quick, and maybe I'm denying myself part of the enjoyment of the game, but it's like, to me, I'm like, I'm trying to skip past this.
Exactly. Part of it is time consideration. When I'm
Yeah,
playing a game, I consider like the crafting is fun, but that's not what I want to spend my time, doing a whole lot. And I do think I am going to go through and beat Tears of the Kingdom. I think the only one I haven't played was the remake of Link's Awakening, but
oh
I've
yeah,
played every Zelda game. And yeah, I loved that the first dungeon I did. I loved it because it had kind of the classic dungeon feel. I'd be in a room and it's like, okay, how do I get out of this room?
yeah.
You know. So but I guess, good on Nintendo in a way. They're kind of that's what they need to do a lot in games is give the players tools to do things. But I, in this other thing that I think is generational, it's very easy for an older person to complain that things have changed. And
Get off my lawn.
sometimes things will just change, but then, like you've always brought up and you actually do yourself, is then make what you wanna see.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that and Nike brought it up here in the chat. It's like, do you think game developers should more regularly release remasters and remakes of games? Um
I think it's happening right now as a way to make money to fund development for something else.
yeah, I agree. And
Yeah.
what you're going to find is that there's a lot of people out there that are developing classic style games. Like, I think that there was and this, I think it came out last year. It was a PS1 style, like, Resident Evil game,
Yeah.
but it was like, instead of zombies, it was like mechanical marionettes or something like that. So
Yeah.
it's like, and it had the fixed camera angles, it had the tank controls. It was like a classic Resident Evil, and I think that, the boomers like Adam and I are like,
Yeah.
you know,
That's,
I don't
something.
like this new aim down sights Resident Evil. I want my my old school. And so yeah, people are just gonna make the thing that they want. And
And that
it's so funny to see, like, it used to be that, like, 8-bit and pixel art graphic games were like all the rage, and now we're
right.
getting like PS1, PS2 era style graphics in games, like, as a feature, not a bug.
Right, and I'm still waiting for the next base building RTS to take off because I feel like base building RTSs have kept trying to come back and they just don't work. And I just think it's because they're like a lot of like what's been more popular now has been that survival style RTS where
Right.
you're just confined really to an area and it's fun to do, but you're building up your camp. What I
Yeah.
liked about base building RTSs was not only was I building up a base in the camp, but there was an enemy base somewhere and I had to
Yes.
go explore the map. Oh, a new resource area. I'll build a base here too, put some defenses up. I feel like and you know what? We're talking about how nowadays crafting and building is such a big part of especially younger generations gaming that I think the next RTS, and I guess I'm coming up with this on the spot, that really needs to just lean into the building, make it where it's not static. Here's this building, here's that building, but maybe components to where you build a specific type of building based on different components you have at your disposal.
That's a great
And
idea.
yeah,
Absolutely.
and even units, like, really make it where here's a chassis for some sort of armed vehicle, and then here's all the different components. Some games have tried that. There is a like, Petroglyph that used to be Westwood, they keep coming out with these little experimental RTSs. they're always just halfway good because they have an idea, they just never go all the way. They have, like,
Right.
the 8-bit armies, 8-bit horde series, and then they had this other game, I can't think of the name right now, but you actually built what your units would look like when you build them. Um, yeah, RTSs just need to come back. Uh,
I
I don't
agree.
know.
I agree. I miss the old school RTS of like, especially when you would play against the AI characters and it's like you don't even know how many AIs are on the map. You've got the fog of war going on and you
Oh,
might
yeah.
stumble across their main base, but it's like
Yeah, and that was another thing that only I wanna say it was only Tiberian's Son that did this, and then in Red Alert 2 I forget, but there was a time where then RTSs all and I think it was because of StarCraft, they all had symmetrical maps that people could memorize. It is almost like it became a numbers thing, like,
yeah.
symmetrical map, I know what to do, so who's the quickest at doing everything? Whereas in the Command& and Conquer games, they always had um, oh, yeah, the original, procedural generated stuff.
Yeah.
You would be on a map, who knows where the enemy is, who knows where the Tiberium is, you just have to explore and build. That a another series that, again, if they had a lot of money, it could do well, the Spellforce series. Those are
Oh,
action RPG base building RTSs, where between sections of base building, you would have your character and you would go through a whole map and just fight, and then you would come across a new area to build a new base and base build. I just think it had too many good components that each one was just mediocre,
yeah, yeah.
but it could be done. There's so much room for these games to really, yeah. And I think that okay, this is kinda going back to what we're talking about. So incentivizing the player helps the game be successful. And
Yes.
I think the reason why RTSs and maybe some games are failing is because part of incentivizing a player is kind of bringing unique ideas into a game in the first place. So
Yeah.
think about it. It is a positive notion to incentivize a player. So that's just injecting positivity into a game that then is gonna have a positive outcome for a player. Whereas if you wanna punish players, that might have more of a negative, and where you could debate that would be the Souls-like games, but I think where it changes is once you've defeated an area, it's such a rewarding feeling. I mean, I tell you, like, I would be emotional in
Yeah.
Dark Souls beating bosses, like
And the thing is I don't think that there aren't a lot of people that really enjoy a Souls game when they go through doing a no kill run. Like you almost
yeah,
are rewarded in a way for participating in this system of death and rebirth,
yep,
because you're going to learn a little bit more about how to beat those bosses. It's not and so the people that do like no kill runs in or like no death runs in Souls games, it's like, well, it's because you already benefited from playing it so much that like you had runs that you played that where you were killed.
yep.
And you just memorize the boss patterns that way.
Would you
But
say with Resident Evil 4, there had been an injection of incentivization that gives it a leg up? Or do you think it was more of injecting sort of, I don't wanna say ease of play.
yeah, I wouldn't say it was ease necessarily. I think that the problem was you know, classic Resident Evil games, you wanted to avoid conflict if possible.
Yeah,
Resident Evil 4 and forward, and I'm talking like the original Resident Evil 4, is they really
yeah,
wanted to encourage players to like, you have to get close to these zombies and fight them.
yeah.
Or in this case, it would be the Ganados. But you know, maybe it was too incentivized because then you basically turned a survival horror game into an action game.
Yeah,
And then the
exactly.
problem is, okay, well then how do we then discourage the player from just going through and mowing down all these Ganados? Well, that's where we have to throw in enemies like the Regenerators, which are a pain in the ass. Like, you know,
And that reminds me of the control system too. Originally, Resident Evil 4 was based on the tank controls, added
hmm
kind of that win back where you have to stand still and then aim.
yeah,
But now with the new Resident Evil 4, it's like you just run around. It's just another shooter.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And I think that as a result of trying to correct the behavior that they incentivize themselves, they end up punishing newer players because then it's like, you know, my wife probably didn't enjoy Resident Evil 4 more than any of the new Resident Evil remakes. Like like
Mhm.
Resident Evil 2 was probably her second favorite game after Breath of the Wild. and part of that was because she felt like, "Okay, I can play this because sometimes I know when I can shoot and when I can run away." The problem with Resident Evil 4 is that they want you to fight. Like, there's no situation, I think, in the Resident Evil 4 remake, I can't think of a single situation where the optimal decision is to run away.
Yeah. I didn't
It's
get too far into it, but yeah, it was almost like each section was set up to clear it out.
yeah. And so, like, there are a couple of instances with the regenerators where it's like, okay, you can run away from this one, but then there's the one where it's like, Ashley, get in the locker. I have to fight this regenerator, and there's no other way past it. It's like
Mm.
you have to kill the regenerator in order to let Ashley out. My wife couldn't do that because, and it's a skill issue. Sure, fine.
Yeah.
We can have that conversation about, like, easy mode in games and all this stuff,
Oh.
but
Yeah,
like,
I saw that Twitter thread where someone was, like, saying about From Software being, what is it? A
like
very strong
selfish.
term against people that want an easy game. It's like, this is not the you don't have to fight about a video game.
Yeah,
Like,
come
it's
on. Yeah, like, but yeah, I mean, it's like I said, it's about incentivizing players in a positive way, not in a negative way, not punishing them for not doing the thing you want them to do, but rewarding them for doing the thing you want to do. If you engage in this fight, then you get bonuses, then you get perks. And I think that the classic Resident Evil did that because it was like in Resident Evil 3, the original one on PlayStation, um if you fought Nemesis, you could unlock really powerful weapons. You could get the Magnum parts, you could get the rocket launcher and what have you. If you chose to run away, that's fine. It doesn't punish you for it. You just don't unlock the secret stuff.
and that's a good example of a developer trying something different and really applying these philosophies, these
Yeah.
sort of positive enforcements. Um, yeah, I'm trying to think, what are some other, recent games, because I'm always playing newer games. Um I just can't think off the top of my head actually, but yeah, there's I think a lot of what's going on in the industry, games are getting released where, there's a lot of bugs and stuff. It's because they're just trying to push the tech and
Yeah.
make it look samey. There's really not a focus on what could we do, to make the game, and that's the thing because it's like they can still make money off of just making a triple A looking game. Let's just make a triple A looking game. It's gonna make money.
Yeah.
Look at all the games that come out buggy, yet they're still selling well, yeah, it's just kind of interesting. It
Yeah.
it it could be we're on this side of the pendulum, or I think that's a term to use where it's just post-COVID. I think that kinda disrupted a lot of development
Oh,
processes.
definitely.
Things that weren't related to game development kind of affected game development, and maybe we'll slowly get back to the other side, which I think is gonna be like a reemergence, like maybe the second or third coming of the indie game, where the indie game will look like a double triple A experience and feel like one.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
and it's funny because and you and I've talked about this where Nintendo their design philosophy is based around creating the game first and the
yeah,
graphics second. Even Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. Tears of the Kingdom, you know, you and I could make a game that looks like Tears of the Kingdom. It really doesn't
yeah,
push it, and it's because of the hardware, of course. Like,
yeah,
the Nintendo Switch is not designed to run, 4K 120 FPS games,
yeah,
but that's never been the focus.
right.
It's not about pushing the AAA graphics. It's about we want to create a gameplay experience.
And
So
that's interesting because a lot of times Nintendo would revolutionize gameplay. They always
yes.
have. From the side scroller to the 3D. I mean, with Mario 64, I think that really made people think, oh, 3D platformers. And then, with the Wii, even though people have moved on from motion controls, at first that was pretty amazing. And I think Nintendo's more on just double downing on their IPs
Yeah.
instead of continuing to revolutionize gameplay. Because while Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom are amazing games, I would say maybe Breath of the Wild revolutionized the idea of like almost like freedom in roaming
Yeah.
the
Oh,
world.
like bringing back the idea of an exploration game as opposed to,
Yeah.
because you and I have talked about that, like the difference between like an open world, like a truly open world game, and a game that's just like it's just non-linear.
Yeah. And then it reminds me of the N64 with the analog stick. Like that
Yeah.
was and the rumble pack. You know,
The
it
stuff that we take for granted now.
but yeah, but now it's like they're not really coming up with new things. They're just like, "We'll just make a very polished version of our IP," you know?
And I think that that's going to be the downside of like AAA studios, I should say, not AAA games in particular, but like
Right.
AAA studios is it's
Yeah.
like it's either the IP or it's, you know,
Service-based.
yeah, just taking advantage of the existing systems and the existing engines and stuff.
Yeah.
Um, whether it's a franchise game like Marvel's Avengers or whatever, or it's an existing line, they're really not willing to take risks on varying types of gameplay, and that's where that stuff is going to have to come from AA and indie developers. And like you said, I think that we are kind of entering that new renaissance with the adoption of a lot of AI techniques. I mean, there's AI texturing for 3D models, there's AI model generation. I just found a tool for AI skybox generation. So that's
Oh, wow.
like,
Oh, that's cool.
yeah, I mean that's
Yeah, make
there's
it easier, these tools are making it easier for the little guy to really come out with revolutionary games.
yeah, it just democratizes the game creation process. And
Mhm.
so I guess, we're probably close to time here. So I guess I want
Yeah.
to leave with this thought is if you are unsatisfied with a way that a game incentivizes a certain play style, or with a way that a game may disincentivize your particular preferred style of play, there's never been a better time to just make the thing you want to make. And it doesn't have to be like, I think a lot of people get hung up on that idea like, well, I want my game to look AAA polished and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom, they are not AAA polished, but the
Roblox.
physics, Roblox, yeah, but the physics in it and it's the systems that make the game appealing, not the graphics.
Right. Exactly, man.
But yeah, what do you think?
Good talk.
What thoughts would you like to leave with when it comes to incentivizing behavior?
Yeah, I think it's more of I'm gonna say the indie gamers or indie developers are gonna be doing this anyway because
Yeah,
that's what they wanna do. I think if these AAA studios really want to be successful, not worry about losing money, they have to think about this because they have the marketing anyway to get the game in people's faces. You just I mean, people will adapt, it is just yeah, a lot of it is the marketing,
yeah,
I mean, for instance, the Avengers game, that should have been a winner, and it
yeah,
wasn't because it just wasn't good.
yeah.
It's
And
basically
right, when you dump all of your money into the marketing, into the IP that you're trying to adapt,
it's not gonna matter if it's not good. So if
yeah,
the game's good, if you know you've got something interesting, it doesn't need to be 80 hours long. It doesn't need to have the best graphics. If a company's got the money to market compelling games.
yeah, 100%.
Mhm.
Well, good deal. Well, hey, if you guys again have not checked out Talos and Adam's video from this morning, definitely have a look at that. And yeah, I apologize for being late on delivering last week's Dissecting Gundam. That will not be the case this week, so we are going to have a new episode of Dissecting Gundam at an appropriate time and place on Friday.
Nice.
Of course, we've got the Gundam Explained show tomorrow. Um,
Yep.
which I guess we're just going to continue talking about gaming. Is the spoiler alert for that?
Yeah, part of it will be because we're gonna have a Gundam gamer on, or a gamer in general, a CyberRank 10. He's into Gundam. He'll be on. But I also want to talk about those trademarks Bandai Filmworks released and do some
Yes.
speculating on what could be coming out. So yeah,
Yeah, I'm
that'll be
pretty
fun.
excited about that stuff as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess final verdict on Verka versus 2.0. If you want the definitive Zeta Gundam Zeta, I think the Verka is probably the way to go. If you want a better kit that is more attuned to building your own sort of thing, if you're going to customize it, paint it, that kind of stuff, the 2.0, solid solid kit, holds up to this day,
Cool.
comes with a stand and the hyper
And
mega launcher, which the Verka does not.
the doesn't it come with the catapult?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I love that.
And
The catapult guy.
brilliant the
Yeah.
way that like the parts of the stand, depending on whether you have it in robot mode or wave rider mode, the parts that you don't use clip to the bottom of the stand. So
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
That's nice,
Can't
yeah.
ask for anything better than that. But yeah,
Yeah.
thank you guys so much for tuning in. This was a fun little chat. Like I said, a little decompression after all this uh, hardcore gaming and
Yeah.
and such that Adam and I have
Yeah,
been doing. But yeah, thank you guys again so much, and thank you, Adam, for your insight as far as
of course.
how to get
Love
these
talking
gamers to
stuff.
play themselves.
Yeah.
Don't hate the game, hate the gamer. I
Yeah, there you
don't.
go. Alright.
But yeah, see you guys tomorrow. Thank you
Yep.
so much
See ya.
again. Cheers.
Cheers.